Hi, I'm Kevin from Miniatures Rundown, and today we're painting one of the new Rotswords from Maggotkin of Nurgle for Age of Sigmar 4th edition. We're going to be going over some of the techniques that I use to get this guy battle ready and ready for the tabletop. And here we go. So we start out by priming this guy black, painting the innermost parts of the flesh here. So gonna mostly Citadel paints in this process. Here I'm using Bugman's Glow. And we're just going to go ahead and just give it a little shake. Now, Citadel paints tend to be a little bit on the thicker side, so I'll thin them out just a little bit. Just putting on my wet palette will usually be enough to thin it out to where it's the consistency that I'm looking for. So I'm just going in on the innermost layers of his flesh and just giving it one coat of Bugman's Glow. And you'll notice that it might be a little streaky, and that's okay. We're going to go over it with another coat just to kind of solidify that and set a good foundation for the rest of the flesh tone that we're doing going forward. See, I'm just going all around the miniature. I'm not being too careful to be very neat and precise because all the details that we would end up going over with the flesh tone here, we're going to end up covering up with detail paints later. So we're not going to worry too much about being super neat and controlled with this initial first. And you see I'm just going over the areas that I went over previously with Bugman's Glow, just to solidify that, get rid of some of that streakiness that came with the first layer. As you can see, we got some good coverage. And I'm making sure just like one of the problem areas that I usually have is the tops of the hands or the back of the thumb area. And so I'm making sure to hit those. So next I'm going in with a wash. I'm using Reikland Flesh Shade here. And it's usually a little bit on the thicker side, a little on the strong side for Reikland Flesh Shade. So I'm just going to thin it out just a little bit by adding some Lamia Medium to it and just giving it a little swirl. And see how it kind of thins out there. This is about the consistency that we're looking for here. And I'm just going to apply that all over the flesh areas that we painted previously with Bugman's Glow. And we're just looking for a nice overall coverage, getting that Reikland Flesh Shade into all the recesses, especially going to be striking on the hands in between the fingers. And because we thinned it out, it should pool nicely into just the recesses and not leave a whole lot of streaking on the surface. You can see we have good coverage all over here. That's really what we're looking for. And next we're going with Cadian Flesh Tone right next to Bugman's Glow here, and we're just going to kind of give it a mix. We're looking to thin it out quite a bit here on the wet palette. I'm going to add in just a touch of water to thin it out, just to kind of give a skim milk consistency. You often hear painters talk about that, and that's kind of what we're looking for here. So as you can see, I'm stretching it out, and that's about what we're looking for. And I'm just going to go over the areas that are just above the recesses, just to build up a tone. And you can see it looks pretty strong as we first apply it on, and that's okay. And it's going to be a little streaky as well. Once again, that's all fine, because once it dries, it's going to solidify a bit and kind of go down in tone a fair amount. And we're going to go over it again with more layers so that streakiness is going to disappear. And really, I'm concentrating on the upper areas of all the musculature and the flesh to give it more volume, leaving the shaded areas more shaded and giving lighter areas that are more towards the top of the model more attention. So you can see I'm really not even hitting the bottoms of the flesh, like underneath the arms and stuff, all that much at all. Just because those areas will be shaded. So we really don't need to hit that with any lighter tones to improve the paint job. Going in with a little bit more and just kind of giving that a little bit more of a swirl, mixing it together. And we're going to get to that same thin consistency by adding a little bit of water. And we're going to go over a second time to get rid of that streakiness and to add just a little bit more of a lighter tone of Bugman's Glow. Bugman's Glow is very dark and kind of purpley, so adding this will bring that value up quite a bit. As you can see, I made a little mistake there where I got some paint, some of that thin paint in the middle of the two fingers, so I'm just going to go in with a dry brush and use capillary action to draw that paint out. And I'll fix it right away. You just have to work kind of fast if you make a mistake like that. Now I'm going in with a little bit of Karak Stone. Now that may be a little bit surprising, but it has some lower values and a little bit of gray to it. So mixing that in with Cadian Flesh Tone gives us a little bit of a pallor that we're going to apply to the top of the flesh and give us a little bit of like a sickly appearance that we're kind of looking for with Nurgle models. So as you can see, I'm just going in right over the very tops, even being a little more judicious than I was with the previous tone. and really just hitting the very tops to just give it a little bit of lightness. And it adds just a lot more depth to the model and really makes those darks really shine, as well as giving a lot of contrast to the flesh, which makes it a lot more visually interesting. Especially this back part here. This back part here is just begging for some freehand, but we're not going to do that today. And we're just going to go a little bit lighter with some more Cadian flesh tone. Lighten it up quite a bit, give our brush a twist, and we're just going to hit the very tops of this to get rid of some streakiness. You see, we have a really good flesh tone going. It looks really good right now. Then we're going in with a little bit of Wraithbone and some Cadian flesh tone and just giving that a mix, and we're going to just do the final highlight on the flesh here. You see, we're just going into the very top. We're just hitting the very, very tip tops of all of the fleshy portions of this guy. And that's going to be our final highlight that just gives a little spot of attention to the tops of all the flesh and musculature that this guy has going on. Especially on the knuckles. There's one you want to use a barrel of the brush to hit those knuckles. That little spot of super high contrast flesh is going to really make that pop. And next we're going in with some Elysian green here. I kind of give it a swirl to thin it out just a little bit. The moisture in the wet palette. And just like we did with the Bugman's flesh. And then we're going to go all over the model on the armor portions and give it a good thorough coat of Elysian green. And it's going to be a little streaky at first because we're going over black. This is a much lighter color. However, as with Bugman's Glow, we're going to do several layers. So what this will do is that streakiness will end up going away. We're going to do, as Duncan Rhodes is fond of saying, 2 thin coats. And he's not wrong. 2 thin coats will be perfect for what we're trying to do here. And you can see I've made a little mistake there. I got some Elysian green on the flesh tone that we had just finished. So that's a little inconvenient, but that can be fixed pretty easily. We're just going to go with a little Cadian flesh tone, thin it out just a tiny bit. I'm just going to go in and just hit that area right there that I got that Elysian green on. And that's going to, it looks a little strong at first, but it will dry out and correct that mistake that I made. So you see I have 1 coat of the Elysian green done. So we're just going to go in again and do some more. And then we're going to take some Lead Belcher and we're going to mix Elysian green and Lead Belcher to kind of give us a metallic green that we're going to lay thinly over that layer of Elysian green that we had first put on. And what this is going to do is kind of give that a metallic sheen, which is going to make it look more like armor and less like kind of lacquered and enameled armor. Make it look a little bit more verdigreed and gross, which is Nurgle. That's what we're looking for. That's about what we're looking for. Same thin consistency, maybe even a little thinner. And then we're just going to go over the top of that Elysian green layer there. And it will just give it a little metallic shine without being overpowering and taking too much. That's exactly what we're looking for. As you can see, it just gives a nice shine to this armor. That undercoat of green really makes it look really nice and Nurgle-y. So now we're going to go in with some Mortarian Grime, which is appropriate. Put some of that down. And I'm going to thin it out a little bit. Some Lamia Medium in there. Just to tone it down just a little, because it can be quite strong. And then really just hitting those creases in the armor where armor plates meet or where the armor plates bend, and giving that wash. And that will really help sink in the details and set the armor, give it a lot of depth. And then even giving some streaking to the eye area here. Just tri-lobe eyes. And then we're going to go in with some Mornfang Brown here. We'll do one of my favorite things I love to do in Nurgle. Add a little bit of Lamia Medium to it. Then really add some water and really just bring it out. We want this to get really thin. Like even thinner than the flesh shade that we did before. Really drawing it out. So it gets kind of that little mottled look there. And then we're just going to put that in all of the little armor rents and dents. And along the rivets. And that's really going to add some grimy streakiness to the model. That's going to really give it the character that we're looking for. Especially those armor rents. Places where dirt would settle. Can't imagine that they take really good care of their armor. I mean, it's Nurgle. It's all about entropy. Because it's so thin, you can let capillary action do a lot of the work with the areas that are where the armor plates meet together. And then even on the back plate here, where we have some armor rents, and we're going to just bring it down and add some streaks. You can just do this however you want, however it feels good to you. Especially here on these eyes. And there's some fluid leaking out of his eyes. He's sad. Morose. His Nurgle's more morose than sad. Especially these rivets here. That's a really good place to add this. Just a little drop. And it really collects around the rivet. Then we're just going to go in and do the weapons. So once again, Leadbelcher is my workhorse when it comes to doing just base metallics. So some Leadbelcher. It's all on the weapons, making sure we get the entirety of the weapon. I'm going to do this for both the sword and the mace. Just kind of that knurled pattern on the handle. And I think we're just going to do that in a metallic. You could do that in leather or cloth or cord, and that would look equally good. But I think I'm just going to do metallic here. Making sure you get the bottom and the top of the hilt. Those are areas that I often miss, so taking extra attention on those. And then now that Nurgle weapons are kind of like cursed and mystical, we're going to do some Koala Green Shade and bring that in, and we're going to add that. Now this is a really strong shade, so we're going to lighten this up quite a bit with some Lamia Medium. So add some Lamia Medium there and then swirl that together. That's about the consistency that we're looking for. And we're just going to go over the entire weapon with this wash. That's going to sink nicely into all the recesses and kind of give it kind of a almost ethereal look, but definitely make it look like the metal is at least partly magical in some way, which it is. Bless my Nurgle. So that's dried nicely. We're going to go in and start hitting the cloth and the leather here. Going with some Raven Black. Very, very dark gray, basically. And we're just going to go over all of the cloth areas here on the loincloth. There's some up above his belt there and along the in between the armor plates. Bring quite a bit of cloth. So we're going to hit all those areas up. Being very careful not to get any on the armor that we worked so hard to get. And then next we're going to do some standard Mechanicum Gray and just mix that together. Not going to do much thinning out except for what the wet palette offers. And then just go in above on all of the top wrinkles of all that fabric. And that's what's going to give us our main tone here for the fabric. Even though we did mostly in the Raven Black, we're going to really get most of our tone from this upper shade here. And then Administratum Gray will be the next color that we mix into this. Just getting a little bit onto our wet palette, and then we're going to swirl it into that previous mix. And then we're the final highlight on this, the tippy tops of all those creases and wrinkles on that fabric. We'll just give it a little bit more depth and life, especially on the knees there. That's a good place to really hit it. It's a good focal point for the model. Let's get a little bit more of that Mournfang Brown. Really draw it out. And we're going to do the same thing we did with the armor with the sword here. Just hit those rents and damage and dings and stuff in the sword. And really around this fly icon that we have here. Let the capillary action just draw that in between all the wings and eyes of the fly. We're going to be very careful around the spikes. Just getting it around all the spikes of this mace. And that will pool around the base of each of these spikes. And that will make it look like a lot of dust and debris and rust has gathered in those areas, which it would. And then next we're going with some Wraithbone for these horns or antlers. I guess they're more antlers. And just being very careful to cover the entirety of the antlers with this Wraithbone. Lots of little creases and stuff in here, so you're really getting the brush in there and making sure it has a complete coverage. It's going to be really important to making these look good. And finally some Nuln Oil, which is the drink of choice for many painters. We're going to put on the very tops and just draw our way from about mid-length up the antler to the top of the antler, and that will give some shading going all the way up. We want these antlers look kind of old and ancient, so making the tips of them look quite a bit older than the bottoms because it's where the freshest growth will be toward the bottom is what we're going to do here. Then we're going to go in with some Warplock Bronze. We're going to use this for that bracer and for all of the scale mail portions of this model. Just going in and being very, very careful to not hit that on any areas where we have already finished the armor or the flesh or the cloth. So patience and brush control with this Warplock Bronze. It's a very, very strong paint. So if you get it anywhere, it's going to stick really well and have really great coverage, which also means you don't want to get it in places where you've already finished painting. It's super reflective too, so you don't really need to do a whole lot to it, depending on what kind of look you're going for. And in this case, I really like how it's finishing off. I'm going to do this bracer here, also in Warplock Bronze. Kind of tie the model a little bit more together, adding an element of that other color in elsewhere will bring this model together really nicely. And then going in with some Runelord Brass, one of my favorite colors. It's hitting the very tops of some of these scales with that, just to give it a little bit more dimension. You don't need to do a whole lot. Warplock Bronze is a really nice color. And as you can see for this process, I've really just used the base brush, a Citadel base brush for almost all of this. Like, you don't need a whole lot of brushes to do good work with painting. And here I am pulling out Monument Hobbies sable brush. I think it's a number 8. Do the next step. So we're going in with a little bit more of that raven black, and what we're going to do on these antlers is we're just going to go to the tip and then draw down and then back up to kind of blend that in a little bit further. You can see my brush is pretty beat up, and this is a great job for a brush that's probably seen better days. See, just applying it, drawing it down, then drawing it back up will help blend that up and make the ends of these antlers look really, really ancient. Just hitting all the tips, all the little points on the end of the antler. And next we're going to do the leather portion. So we're going to do some Rhinox hide here. And just go very carefully on these all these leather parts, just to hit them and give them a good base coat. We really don't want to touch any of the armor or the flesh or cloth that we've done previously. So it's making sure that the paint is nice and thin, and just using the very tip of your brush to apply that paint to the leather portions, especially along the backs of these sabatons here. You want to make sure that you don't spill any over onto the armor. So one of my favorite ways to highlight leather is to go in with flesh tone and mix that with whatever base color leather that I'm using. Flesh tone has a fair amount of purple in it, so adding that to a leather tone is a really nice complement to leather. So I'm just going in and hitting the very tops of all the leather straps, giving them just a little bit of a highlight. You don't need a whole lot, just a little bit. That helps bring that leather quite a bit to life. And there we have it. With the exception of the basing and the tactical goop this guy's standing on, this guy is good to go. Thank you for joining me while we got this Rotsword battle ready. Let me know what you think in the comments below. And thanks again for watching us on Miniatures Rundown. If you like the content you see and you want to see more, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you.